What happens is when you put them outside and that organic fertilizer kicks in, it's going to push new growth, right? Well, at the same time, you're shocking your plant, getting it used to. A lot of questions lately on the podcast and on here about seedling care. So it's cold today, it's raining, it's nasty. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. We're going to talk about heating seedlings, feeding seedlings, watering seedlings, and airflow on seedlings. So we're going to cover all that today. So here's a seedling situation here. I got this bottom row empty just because I'm waiting to probably put a row of flowers down here, more than likely, but we're not so sure yet. But up here, you can see we've got everything going on, and I did forget to mention that I'm going to go over thinning because I see that I need to thin my peppers, for instance. So we're just going to go through, and I mean, it's really easy. That's all I do. So when I come through, I wait until they start getting their true leaves, and then you can kind of look at them and say like, hey, which one's overpowering the other, or which one's got more of a true leaf. So if I come here, you can see this one's got a pretty big true leaf on it, and then the next one, the one right next to it, doesn't. So we will cut the one that's not. And so I've got a lot to do on this one, and I just leave them on there. And I mean, some of them, like this guy right here, has kind of got the seed stuck on it, so we'll leave it. No need to help it out, it will be just fine. But you can see here, we've got a fair amount to go through. So all of these need to be trimmed, and we'll get on that, but same goes for all of them. So even the broccolis here, like you can see some of them are overpowering others or leaning too far a certain way. So we'll go ahead and give the one with the best chance for survival. And even though this one's bigger than this one looks like it's overpowering. And if I left this one, it would just grow and take over. So we're just gonna go ahead and snip that guy. And I'm gonna leave it there. It'll do its thing and work its way back in, it'll dry up. So we go all the way through all of our seedlings, and then we'll take care of them that way. And then even down here, we don't really have to worry about it because these are all just coming up. So, you know, we got the kale, Brussels sprouts, Napa cabbage here, and then this is another tray of lettuce we just started like a week ago. So you can see how fast they grow. The thinning is not a big deal. It's just part of it. Some people like to pull the seedlings out. I don't like to do that because I want to leave the roots nice and just relaxed and unsteady. And the one thing I've found about using perlite on top and just setting the seed underneath is it takes a while for the root to actually penetrate the ground real good and hold that plant in. So I do need to be a little bit more gentle, but just clipping them is fine. If I was really short on seeds or something, then I may pull one up and then move it to another spot. But we don't have that right now. We've got plenty of seeds. We got plenty of stuff going on. But watering. So watering is a big thing for these, and we want to keep them well watered, especially when they're young. So when I water is a little bit tricky. You can't really see the soil here, so it makes it a little bit tricky, but we can touch it and feel if it's damp. And we're going to go through and see if anything needs to be watered, and I think there is one that does. So this one's tough because you can't really see the soil, but I know I watered it, so it's not a big deal. But I can lift it first of all and tell that it is, you know, it's a little bit heavy, and I can also feel the sponginess in the soil. Now if I come over to this one's pretty young, so I'm pretty sure they don't need to be watered, but we'll still check. And it's a little bit lighter, but I have to remember that these root systems are really small right now, so they can be overwatered and underwatered real easily. But I can come here and see that this has got plenty of water in it. And then just coming through all of them, we lift them. These don't need to be watered at all, and bingo bango. This one needs to be watered, and there's two reasons. This has a little bit of moisture in it, but I can tell you that because of the amount of plants in these cells, they're going to dry out really fast. Use all kinds of watering cans, and this is actually a really cheap one. And a lot of times I like to bottom water. So I'll bottom water if the roots are going all the way down, and especially if they're starting to come out the bottom, then I'll definitely bottom water and it's like no mess. But when they're small like this, the roots don't go all the way down, and I don't want them to sit in water for a long time. So like for this one, I'm just going to top water them real lightly and just go work my way around. And so that's all you got to do. Doesn't take a whole lot of water right now because there's not a whole lot of root system. And we don't want to overwater it. It's a little bit of art. You got to judge about how big the plants are. Now I will tell you, like for instance, in about a week, these broccolis right here and stuff, these are all going to start getting really big. And once they start getting really big, you're going to be watering them every couple days, every other day. But when they're small like this and everything's getting started, it's like once a week maybe. If I'm going to go away for a couple days, I'll probably just go ahead and water just to be safe. And I don't want to leave anything sitting in here, but eventually, like I said, once it gets bigger, then you're going to have to leave them sitting in some kind of water so there'll be a little bit extra reservoir and you can really thoroughly soak it. And that's just how I like to do it. So for these small ones here, these smaller ones, these are 72 cells in this 10 by 32. They're going to need more watering than these 6-packs. So you see these are about twice the size. So they definitely hold a little bit more water, which is a benefit of this. But I like the ease of having the solid tray. And just having that right there, so if I want to move this outside, I can just pick this one thing up instead of grabbing, 6 trays, or even this right here that it's sitting in, this drip tray. They get a little flimsy every time, so it's just better for me to have them like this. And I hope to eventually move all to these, or even get trays that are just like 1.5 by 1.5 cell, just all 36 in one. So heat is another thing. Heat is huge. To get seed started, you don't have to have heat for most things, but it really does help and it speeds up the process. And I tested it this year where I did it on a tray of onions, and I had like a tray on the heat mat, and then I had another tray off of the heat mat. And this tray, for instance, started they popped about 3 days early, they germinated. And then actually the ones that were just resting up against here, they were a couple days later, and then these were a couple days after that were just totally bare. So it does speed up the process. Now these cooler vegetables aren't as important, stuff like your brassicas, your onions, and all that. So I found that I don't have to have it, but since I have them, I use them. Now the question becomes is like, how long do you leave them on for? And this is a specific question I got, and I felt like it was important because you don't want to leave these on the mats all the time. You want on the heat mats. You want to pull the heat mats off at a reasonable time rate so that they don't overheat. You don't want to overheat the roots. So for instance, these 3 trays here are all on heat mats. And so I will leave these on these came up about 2 days ago. So I'll leave these on for another couple days until they start roughly getting like this, where you can tell that they're going to be strong and that they're probably going to make it. Then I will. Now these are all cool season vegetables. Now if you start seeing a true leaf, I definitely pull them off at that rate and then don't leave them on there. And so like with peppers and stuff, I actually leave these on longer because they like it warmer. So I'll leave the heat mats on here for a week or 2 easily after they germinate to try and get them a head start and get them going. And I'll do the same with my peppers and squashes and stuff like that as they come in. So the heat mats can be really important and really speed it up and make this plant more comfortable, because if you get it started right, I find that it grows a lot quicker. So once we pull the heat mats off and then everything's established and it's growing, I give it another watering. The heat mats will cause it to go through water a little bit faster as well, so definitely keep that in mind as you're worrying or trying to water and keep up with them. And then when you remove the mats and it's cooler, they won't use as much, but you should have more roots. So there is a little bit of back and forth, but you just keep looking at the soil, keep touching it, and then I check on these every day. Usually every evening I check on them, maybe in the morning, and then I'll see how they're reacting. And if some are kind of, shriveling a little bit, then I know I've gone too far. I definitely lost some peppers over here because of that, which, I'm not worried about it. I have, over 100 peppers started, so it's going to be okay, but you want to keep on top of that. And then we come to fertilizing. So There's a whole bunch of ways you can fertilize. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I've tried a bunch of different ways, and I actually use a combination of two things. So I've traditionally used Osmocote, which is, oh, I got to reach up here and get it. The Osmocote. So it is a time-released fertilizer. And then I've used fish emulsion, and then I've also used like organic fertilizers. And so the issue with the organic fertilizer is it has to actually decompose into the soil before it starts to work. So, and that can take a couple weeks. So by the time you apply it, you may not even be feeding your plant and thinking you are the whole time, which is kind of a shame. And then once you go, you know, if it takes, let's just say 3 weeks, I think it's in a cool environment like inside of a house, probably about a month before it works. So 3 to 4 weeks. So I don't fertilize until the first true leaves come out. And if I put that in, then I have 4 more weeks. Now at that point, technically your seedlings should be almost ready to go outside, and you haven't even started feeding them yet. So what happens is when you put them outside and that organic fertilizer kicks in, it's going to push new growth, right? Well, at the same time, you're shocking your plant, getting it used to A, brighter sun, B, colder weather, and C, more wind. So, and then also drier conditions if you want to throw that in. So you have all these things working across it. When you get that new growth, you can cause it to burn or die back. So that's where the Osmocote comes in, because it is a water release, time released fertilizer. So when it gets wet, it releases, and then it sits on the surface until it doesn't, until it gets wet again. So it's not always fertilizing either. But you can see, I'll show you right now how it looks. So they're just these little pellets here. If I can pull this one up without ruining anything. Yeah, so you can see here how it crushes, and then it was whole and it splits, but when it splits, it starts releasing that fertilizer when it gets wet. So it just takes one application before it starts to get wet, and then it starts releasing a little bit of fertilizer at a time. And so what you can also do, and I do a lot, is I'll get a fish fertilizer, and just you look at your directions on the fish fertilizer. I don't know off the top of my head because I eyeball it nowadays. I think it's like a 1/4 cup per gallon, maybe a couple tablespoons, whatever. It doesn't matter for this. And what I do is I'll use my watering can's a gallon, and I'll put like 1/2 teaspoon in, just enough to like discolor it completely. You know, just so it's like you can see through it, but it's just a little bit brown, like cloudy, real light cloud. And then that's what I water with, and you'll see an instant, almost, you know, within a day or two, you'll see a jump, but it's a real light fertilizer, so it'll give it that boost. So I use that in conjunction with the Osmocote. And usually, depending on how I want my plants to go out, I'll usually use a fish fertilizer first, and then the Osmocote, but there's one caveat to that. I gotta do it outside because it's a little stinky, and I usually take my seedlings out onto my porch, and then I go ahead and just use a diluted fertilizer on it and keep them going, and then let them sit out there if it's a nice day in the shade, and off gas a little bit so that stink doesn't come back in the house so bad. And then I'll come back and I'll put the Osmocote on. So the one thing I don't like about the Osmocote, and I'm not sure about it yet, is I don't know if the outside coating on it is a microplastic. So if you look at that, you can see that it's these little balls. And I've noticed when the fertilizer's out of it, it leaves just the shell of it. And I don't know if that's a microplastic or not. I've actually sent an email to them to ask them, because if so, then I'm going to switch brands or to something different. But I want to make sure that I'm not adding more damage than I am causing good just for the sake of the garden. And so when I go to fertilize it, I'll take that and I just come across and just loosely put it on. It doesn't take a whole terrible amount of fertilizer, and I'll put that and go through and do the whole thing. And some cells will get more than others, some will get less, and that's okay. You know, it doesn't take a whole lot to feed stuff at this time. And then if you're also using the fish fertilizer at the same time, then you're kind of getting, you know, you're feeding it right away, and then you're watering it a little bit. See, there's different ways to do it, and you just got to find what's comfortable for you. Now, the problem with like a synthetic fertilizer, even the fish fertilizer, for instance, is you can burn young seedlings very easily with that stuff. So that's why I opt for like the time released option. I don't use that in my garden after this part. I use regular organic fertilizers and stuff like that that have to decompose. And I'll also use a fish fertilizer. But if you wanted to go like a synthetic route or something, you got to be really careful to dilute it because it will burn and it will kill your seedlings right away. So you've got to be careful with that. And I just kind of decide to use the safer method for this because these are my babies. You know what I mean? I got a whole clan of babies here and I want to take care of them and I want to feed me and other people around me. So I just want to be very careful. And the other thing that's really important is wind movement. I realize I said that wrong and it's airflow. So there's that. So I just have these clip-on fans here. You can get them off Amazon. And I think there's a link below for Amazon to help kick back to the page if you want. But we use these, and you can see I have this one on, and this one's on low right now. And then I have this one off. And so I don't turn them on until the seeds get established and they're actually big enough to move. So you can, if we keep it here, you can kind of see a couple of them moving. And you can see that. So those would be fine. And that's why I have it kind of angled a little bit more so the wind can come across, because this is what helps strengthen your plants for when they get outside. Because if you don't, as soon as the wind hits them, they'll just fall over and give up. So we try to do that. Now this tray over here, I put in last, so it doesn't really need it yet. I mean, you can see nothing's really affecting them, and I don't really want to damage them too much by moving them right now. But as soon as they really get their true leaves going, and I see a couple true leaves coming, then you can start putting the fan on them. And I start it on low, and then I move it to high once they get nice and big and they're starting to block each other and stuff like that. Because the issue is the fan will also help to, one, dry out your seedlings and then keep them a little bit cooler. So you just got to be careful with that. Know that once you turn that fan on, you've really got to start looking out for the soil to dry out. And so this one right here, it'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks before I really start thinking about turning the fan. Probably 2 weeks before I turn the fan on here. Once I give them their first shot of fertilizer, probably, then it may be about time to turn the fan on and get those going. Gotta have the airflow because it helps from keeping it stagnant in there, and also helps bring the moisture out so it's not just sitting in a humid environment. So make sure that you kind of, you know, you've got to have some kind of airflow, or else it's just, you're really going to be fighting an uphill battle. So that's important. And then the lights, they're just simple lights I got off Amazon. I think they're in the list below as well. I think it was all 6 lights for like $60 or something. And then I just raise them up. Once the plants meet them, I just raise them up. And then that's really about it. I mean, it's pretty simple. So it's just all about testing out and feeling what works good for you in your setup, and then what you can manage for yourself. And I realize a lot of people aren't starting this many seeds. And I mean, this is the 3rd round of seeds that we've had on this shelf being full. And then we're going to have probably 2 or 3 more rounds by the beginning of the growing season of things going outside. I know some people are going to ask about potting up, and we're going to get to that in another video. It's probably too soon for that for a lot of people, but some things do pot up and some things don't. And generally this time of year, I don't repot anything. Nothing usually gets potted up before it goes outside. So that's pretty easy. Now in the summer stuff and all that, the only thing up here would be the peppers. They definitely will get potted up, but dude, they've been in the ground for they take forever to go. So I don't know. We got plenty of time for that. But I do know one thing. It's going to be 25 degrees tonight, 23 degrees or so, and I've got to go get all of my seedlings and protect them that are hardening off, because I don't want this freak freeze, because it's going to be 70 degrees all next week.